We are now on agenda item number 7, which is the draft Non-Discrimination in Employment and Housing Practices Ordinance and materials. That'll be presented by Gary
Madam Mayor?
Reedner. And it looks like Dan has a question.
You know, we've talked about this enough. I want to approve
No,
the
I'm not
ordinance
going to
and
listen, and we're going to have a presentation from Gary Reedner. I'm not acknowledging any motions at this point until we hear from the public. Gary, please.
Madam Mayor, point of order. I'm not sure it's proper to cut off a motion. You recognize Dan. He has the ability to make a motion from the dais.
You know, I'm not prepared to do that. We have our city staff here ready to do a presentation, and I would accept points of order, but I'm not.
Then I would inquire of the city attorney what's a ruling on the procedure.
Gary, the objective, I think, is to disallow input from the public, and I think this issue is so important. The council members know it's very important from the volume of emails we've received.
We've received a volume of emails, and honestly, do we need to hear more? I think that everybody here has an opinion on it, and I think that we're ready to move on.
I would encourage you to please be receptive to the input. This is an emotionally charged issue. This is an issue of significance in our society as well as our community.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
I would ask your consideration of that in this case.
I'd like you to. The thing is now, though, that anything is political posturing, and just any testimony would be to that effect. You didn't even hear my motion.
I don't know. I'm not listening to that. I wanted to hear our report from city staff at this point. Gary, would you like to comment to that? We've had a question about the propriety of this. The point of order. Can you respond to that in your capacity as city attorney?
If I can get my cheat sheet, I certainly probably.
Please do. Please do. And while he's looking that up, I'll use chair's prerogative. Depending on the outcome of this, I want to thank all of those on all sides of this issue who have chosen to weigh in. It's clearly an issue that is strongly felt by members of our community as well as our nation, and I think it warrants the kind of discussion, the thoughtful input that we've received via emails, handwritten letters, face-to-face communication, and the very careful consideration by the various commissions, especially our Human Rights Commission and Fair and Affordable Housing Commission. So however this turns out here this evening, please know that your concerted efforts are truly appreciated.
Okay. I guess I would request some clarification. You're asking what precedence the point of order takes at this point?
The request was mine of the city attorney, if I may answer that.
Please go ahead.
No, my point, Gary, was that the mayor recognized Dan, and Dan started to make a motion, whereupon the chair, the mayor, cut him off, effectively saying, I'm not going to take any motions. I do not believe that to be proper procedure under Robert's Rules of Order, which we follow loosely. We do not follow it to the letter. But that I believe that Dan, having been recognized, has the ability to make a motion, and once that motion's made, the chair is required to request whether or not there's a second. And it proceeds from there. That's the question to the city attorney.
Okay, and from my point of view, I did cut him off prior to his completing a motion, and as we follow Robert's rules loosely in the city, the practice has been, by the nature of having this agenda before us, to have a presentation, and I introduced this as this topic presented by Gary Reedner. So I would say, without having the presentation by Gary Reedner, we have not heard the agenda item presented to us as yet. Gary?
I can respond to the question of once a member, following Robert's Rules of Procedure, which we do, as Walter said loosely, we've never adopted the full version, states that once a member of the body is recognized, Once that person is recognized by the chair, that person as having the exclusive right to be heard at that time. Then it talks about how to obtain the floor, typically done by addressing the chair and then the chair recognizing the member of the body. Once the chair recognizes that person, this member then has the floor and can remain standing, speak in debate, or make a motion as permitted under the rules. So, question remains whether Dan was recognized. If he was recognized, then he may do anything that with the floor at that time that he requires. The question about whether or not the item is properly presented or appropriately presented, I believe that it should be presented at least, the staff report given on it. That would be my own personal opinion in that the agenda paraphrases and some folks don't have the agenda or the action before it. So with that, now whether the chair is going to allow public debate or whether the motion is made, I'm not sure what the motion would have been, but it seems to me that Dan was appropriately recognized by the chair.
Correct. My point is that any of these items on any agenda, someone could stand up and be duly recognized at the beginning of a meeting and just go down the list without any reports, as long as they were not public hearings requiring that process, and say, I move this, this, and this, and go down the entire list. We would have no requirement for any presentation, any substantive presentation on the issue by city staff. I would argue that this case for consideration tonight has not even been presented to the City Council. Therefore, the rationale for putting forward a motion is moot.
Madam Mayor, my comments have only to do with procedure. If we get into the business of the chair cutting off members because I don't want a motion right now, and this is not the first time it's happened, but in the past members of this body have allowed it, I think we're going down a rocky road. My comments have nothing to do with what's before us. It has to do with protecting a recognized council member's ability to say what he wishes to say, as Robert's Rules of Order apparently says he can do. I have no idea what Dan's motion is going to be, and he may not get a second. If a member is recognized and makes a motion to pass the entire agenda, and we're going to go home right now, then I would be shocked if they could get a second, much less an affirmative vote to do it.
I acknowledge that I did recognize Dan. Let me tell you, I actually read Henry Johnston's email, as all of our council members did today, with the recommendation of a mechanism for curtailing any public input on this. I think that this issue is important enough that it is heard in a public forum with public input. We have people on at least two sides of this issue, if not more. And I would let me acknowledge Dan, as I did at the outset, and let me encourage every other council member to not second this motion, because in fairness to our community on an issue of such importance, I implore you to allow the people who have come to speak, including Gary Riedner, who will present this. And Dan, I would ask you to not move forward with such a motion, whatever it is you're intending to do. I think this is a matter of more importance than whether we can just bamboozle the chair who's too nice to call on people.
I don't think we're trying to bamboozle you, Your Honor.
No,
it's a matter of...
I knew it was coming, and I still played out. I call on people who raise their hands.
You would make a good elementary school teacher.
I would. I would implore you to not make such a motion.
I would like to make a motion that we approve the ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that it be read by title and published by summary.
We've had a motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have Wayne's second. The council's prerogative here is to pass this with no discussion or to disallow it.
Madam Mayor, at this point, you normally ask for discussion.
I am. I'm using chair's prerogative to let people know what the conversation is. I actually don't even have to do that, but Sue, go ahead.
I'm in favor of the motion, however, I would like to hear Mr. Reeder's presentation first.
Yeah.
That's
Tom?
my discussion point.
I'm definitely supporting the motion. I just would prefer to do that after, there's the horse and cart thing. I just wanted to hear from Gary. And I also wanted to hear if there were any other folks in the audience that wanted to speak to it. So.
Yeah, I think it's a slap in the face to the value of the issue at hand for the council. Just say, we're too anxious to go home. We just want this done. And I think that's too bad.
I don't think that's how the motion was framed. I would like to hear from Gary, too. I've got no
Well,
problem with
that's
that.
not part of the motion. The motion is to pass
If
this, so.
they would like to hear from Gary,
Would
that's
you
gonna
like
be
to
part of-
modify your motion, Dan?
I'd like to hear from Gary.
It doesn't require modification, Mayor. We ask questions of staff all the time during discussion after
The
motion.
motion is to pass the ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and it be read by title and published by summary.
Yes, ma'am. And when you call for discussion, we discuss, and quite often, we ask staff for
We do.
comment. And
We do.
And at least 3 of us
I'd like Dan to
have
modify
said we'd like to
his
hear from
motion.
I'd
staff.
like to hear from staff. I don't think I need to modify the motion because
I would like you to do that, please.
I'm asking Gary to go ahead and give his report.
And Wayne, the seconder, do you want to report?
Is that a motion?
No.
No, I just want to hear the report.
Okay, we'll start the roll call vote with you. Dan?
To hear the report?
No way. You just asked for this thing to be moved along.
Well, if that's what you'd like, aye.
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 Okay, the motion carries. We have ordinance number 2013-6, an ordinance of the City of Moscow. Let me find that here. A municipal corporation of the State of Idaho providing for the amendment of Moscow City Code Title 10 by the addition of Chapter 19 to prohibit discriminatory acts in housing, employment, and public accommodations based upon sexual orientation and/or gender expression identity as defined, providing that the provisions of this ordinance be deemed severable, and providing that this ordinance to be in full force and effect from the date of its passage, approval, and publication according to law. And I'll just add that I think it's unfortunate that Moscow will be poked fun at again for its means of adopting something as vitally important as this. We have made history in the state of Idaho again.